Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. We're on to episode 5 in the Hermetic Principles Series. This principle is very, very cool and something that I'm quite passionate about myself. It's the principle of rhythm. And the reason I love this principle so much is because it kind of breaks apart the flippant way we talk about going with the flow. And I've always really questioned that when someone says, I'm just going with the flow. I'm like, well, which flow's that? What flow are we talking about? What does that mean exactly to go with the flow? So that's kind of the principle of this, the principle of rhythm. It's talking about that. In a nutshell, it says that everything flows in and out and nothing stays still, which we know to be true, don't we? Even when you're at rest, things are still flowing, in your body, in the world around you, et cetera, et cetera. Rhythm is the pulse of life. Is it just me, or does anyone else get that song in their head, The Globe? I'm showing my age here. When I hear pulse of life, in my head, I hear, can you throb to the pulse of life? Anyway, I digress. If you've now got that stuck in your head, sorry, not sorry. The pulse of life. So we inhale, we exhale. We sleep, we wake, we have joy, we have sorrow, a bit like we were speaking about last week. There's gain, there's loss. So just like the ocean tides, everything has a swing, a pendulum to it, doesn't it? And when we try and force the perpetual highs to always be on that high life, always having everything great, always being happy, always being at the top, always having success, when we try to push that as the norm to only have the highs, all that happens is it's like trying to make the tide stay in. Eventually you're going to drown. It makes sense, right? So let's talk about some of these rhythms and how it applies to, real life, to today. So I'm going to start from a more psychology flavor about the mind and body and the rhythms that go on in there. One that you may be very familiar with already is circadian rhythms. So, our brain and our body, it literally runs on a rhythm. The sleep-wake cycles, our hormone fluctuations, our energy peaks and dips. They're all natural oscillations, aren't they? When we fight that natural flow, when we fight it, that's when we get burnout. Because we're not flowing with our body's natural and brain's natural rhythm. We're trying to fight against it. However, when we flow with them, our performance is increased, isn't it? We actually have better days. Or ask any sports person when they find their flow, when they're in the zone, their performance is better. In the zone is about getting in touch with your flow. And what about mood? Mood goes in cycles as well. And even our mental health has psychological ebbs and flows. We have good days, we have flat days, we have, bad days, good days, cloudy days, crappy days, ecstatic days. It all ebbs and flows. When we can recognize that, when we can see it for what it is, it actually helps us stop catastrophizing, which is something that a lot of us do. When something goes bad, we think, holy shit, that's the end of the world. It doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes we consider it to be such a terrible, terrible thing that's happened. And perhaps it's not. It's simply that we've expected our life to continue on this really high level. And so when it dips, it hurts. And that has to do with resilience as well, which is, part of that. There's plenty of studies around that show that people who always expect life to be up high, they expect that of themselves or of their life they've created, they hit the hardest when there's setbacks. They find it harder to bounce back. They don't have as much of a resilience muscle because their expectation is always to stay at that level. Whereas those who accept that there are cycles, they recover faster because they trust that the pendulum's going to swing back the other way. They know that there is a rhythm and they trust their own rhythm, that when there's a setback, that's okay. It just means I'm going to thrust back forward again, you know? Let's move on to philosophical tendencies and where this may come from and where it comes into play. This principle has been around for ages, absolutely ages. You know, we think totally new information. No, it's been around for ages. You may have heard of a saying from an ancient Greek philosopher way before Socrates' time. His name was Heraclitus. Now, probably his most famous quote is that the only constant in life is change. However, the one that I want to kind of put forward here is when he said, you cannot step into the same river twice. And what he's pointing to is that constant flux, that reality is motion, it's rhythm, it's change. It has to keep moving all the time. You cannot step into the same river twice. So it's understanding that life will have a cycle. Everything will keep changing and moving. And if you can go with that, you're going to feel a lot less resistance. And as I said, that was ages ago. So that's around, I think, like 500 BC. Long time. Taoism, if you're familiar with that belief system, the yin yang symbol again is rhythm. That's what that's about. That, you know, darkness can become light. Light can become darkness because it exists in both of us. Neither are permanent and both are necessary. My cat has come to join me. Okay. So that belief system from Taoism, that's been around for like 2,500 years. Again, long time. It's been around for ages. Stoicism is a school of thought that's kind of become popular again in a way. However, again, been around for quite a long time. And there was a philosopher, a Stoic philosopher by the name of, I get his name mixed up, Epictetus. Epictetus. He really wanted to teach people and get them to accept that things are beyond our control. So when we try to force only good things, he said it was like fighting the natural swing of fortune's wheel. That were his words. So again, it's about not always expecting that things are going to always stay up high, up in the good stuff, that it's going to have ebbs and flows. And the interesting thing about Epictetus is that he was actually born into slavery. So he pulled himself from what could be quite a low and ended up becoming such an important voice in the world of philosophy. So amazing things to learn from philosophy there from a long time ago. Some of you know that I'm also qualified to teach and train and coach in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So there's some elements in that as well that come into this principle. A couple that I thought of when I was going through this, anchoring. We unconsciously, we link states to rhythms. Think of it this way. A certain song comes on and it can immediately swing you into nostalgia. You can immediately start thinking about a time when, or it may make you think of a certain person or something. So the rhythm of that links to how you're feeling. When you know this, when you see it for what it is, it allows us to kind of ride the emotional tide rather than getting dragged under. Look at the metaphors today, flowing. Another one is reframing. You can use reframing to get back into that swing. So instead of using language like I'm stuck, which you can see from the language, it's moving out of that flow, isn't it? I'm stuck. I'm in a slump. You can reframe it to, you know what? I'm in the downswing of my rhythm. The upswing's coming. Look out. You can tell yourself these things and remind yourself that Every downswing will be followed by an upswing. Okay? And this shift in thinking and language, it changes how we act right now, because it changes our body language, our perception, and the way that we move forward. The third one is meta programs. And this is from a master's level of NLP if you've only done practitioner level. However, with meta programs, something that you learn in that is that some people are away from motivated, which means they push away from pain, and others are towards motivated, which means they pull toward goals. This is a carrot and a stick. You may have heard that metaphor before. If you're more a carrot person where you move towards a reward, or you're more of a stick person, what gets you motivated is avoiding the bad consequence or the punishment or something like that. Either way, carrot, stick, away from, towards, they still swing like rhythms, and you need both. Both have their place. So it's recognizing that it's not, one or the other, and one's good and one's bad. You need them both in order to appreciate and understand the other. I said earlier when I started this episode that, I kind of had a personal interest in this principle because I never really understood when someone would say, oh, I'm just going with the flow. And I felt like we really glorify it. If you're at a party or you're going somewhere with friends or even in a relationship or you're doing a work project or, project at uni or school or whatever, saying, yeah, I'm easy, I'll just go with the flow, it gets praised. And so, you're totally flexible and chill. Like, fantastic. You're so easy to get along with. Here's the catch, though. There's a catch in that. And I bet you can already see where I'm going. Often the flow that we're going with, that we say, yeah, I'll just go with the flow, it's not our flow. It belongs to someone else. It's what someone else wants. So when we always conform to external rhythms, what it creates in us is cognitive dissonance. You may remember cognitive dissonance is when our internal needs are not matching our outward actions. So if you're saying I'm going to go with the flow and you start acting as such, and it's not what you really want internally, you're going to get that internal ick where you don't feel comfortable, or perhaps it might show up in that suddenly you feel really tired, or you get a headache, or your muscles are sore. You just don't feel good. You feel ick. That's cognitive dissonance. The other thing it creates is emotional labor. Emotional labor comes, that exhaustion that comes from constantly adjusting yourself to maintain the status quo for others, to keep everything in harmony, to stop the boat rocking. When you're constantly adjusting your needs and your wants, who you are, you're constantly adjusting it to meet the needs of others, it creates emotional labor and you get exhausted. And so I've always thought about that for someone who's always going with the flow, eventually they're going to get really tired. And maybe sometimes those people eventually snap too and blow a gasket, So here's my secret, I think, about this. The secret isn't to go with the flow. That's not the ultimate. I think it's being able to move with your own flow whilst negotiating other flows. Seeing the other flows, understanding the other flows, knowing your own flow and being able to move with that. Imagine it like rivers that merge, yeah? Sometimes the currents align, sometimes they clash. And so the art of this, the skill, comes in knowing when to bend and when to assert your own flow, your own rhythm. And I think that takes practice because it's not something that we're accustomed to. We get concerned that we're going to be seen as difficult to get along with, stubborn even. And yet it doesn't have to be that way. Nor does it mean that you dig your heels in and it's only ever your way or the highway. As I said, it's about learning your own flow, moving with your own flow while still negotiating the other flows. That takes skill and practice. How does that look? Let's do work first, like a work-life balance. So you may have heard of hustle culture. It gets pushed a lot. And you know what? It works for some people, and kudos to them. This is not about judgment. However, from what I've seen anyway, hustle culture really does push the always up, always pushing, keep going for more, 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 more. But burnout will show up because your internal rhythm demands downtime as well. Not always the pushing up. You have to have some downtime. You have to recharge and replenish. So the mastery comes from honoring the rest as much as you do the grind. And I think sometimes that's the step that gets missed. The grind is well and good, and it gets things going, and it gets you where you want to be. Great. And then when I see those people grinding and getting it, when they choose to rest, it's difficult for them. There's guilt attached. Their mind won't shut down because there's so much more they could be doing. And, oh, this is just lazy. And all this negative self-talk comes in. However, honoring that downtime, honoring that rest is what allows the grind to be so powerful. In relationships, you can see it when you've got a couple that maybe have different rhythms. You may have one member of the couple whose rhythm is really social, always wanting to go out, talking to everyone, social butterfly, yabba, yabba, yabba. And then you've got the other partner whose rhythm may be more reflective. Perhaps they're a bit more quiet, like a bit of solitude, like to sit with their own voice and their own thoughts, etc. Either one of them, if either one of them were to go entirely with the flow of the other, you can see how it would abandon their own needs. And then there's no harmony there. Either one, they're going to get exhausted from constantly, again, giving up or surrendering or abandoning their own needs. The harmony in a relationship, when it comes to rhythm, comes from alternating, swinging between both the rhythms, understanding that. With your personal goals, your personal rhythm, you might notice that you have real bursts of motivation, and maybe that's a real burst to work out and go hard, or maybe it's a real burst of creative energy where you've just got so many ideas and you're creating lots of stuff. That's great too. However, when your rhythm dips, it's easy to look at that as a negative thing and think, where did that, I had so many ideas and now I just don't care. We get so down because we think we've lost something, that it was just a flash in the pan. However, what I want to say is that if you force productivity when your rhythm dips, then that too is going to just create more negative emotions within you. More of that emotional labor is going to come out of that. So what if instead of forcing it, we actually just accept that down cycle as replenish, refuel, use it for reflecting, planning what you want to do next. And then when the upswing comes, it's already got fuel to go because you've taken that time to reset. Lots of rewords: reflect, reset, recharge, replenish, all those things. I trust that makes sense on how you can apply that in your real life. In real life today, I guess to kind of wrap this up, let's bring it together. Alison, land the plane. The principle of rhythm, it's not about passive drifting. It's conscious surfing. It's recognizing the tides, honoring your rhythm, syncing with others without losing yourself in it. And I know it sounds easy enough. It's a simple concept. It doesn't mean that it's easy to do. It does take practice. So what I would suggest to you, what the challenge is that I put to you from this, is to not just go with the flow. Go with your flow while respecting the larger currents that may be around you. That's emotional mastery at work right there. I believe I've wrapped that up. So that wraps up today's episode of Automatic Mouth. Listen, if you found this helpful, and I trust you did, please let me know. I'd love to get a comment if you found something helpful in this or what your key takeaway was from this episode. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. I need the numbers. I would love the numbers. Thank you. And when you like and subscribe, it ensures that you don't miss the rest of the episodes of this Hermetic Principles series. And you know what? If you think this could be helpful to someone else, share it with them. They may need a reminder that when the dips are low, it doesn't mean that they're broken or they've lost it or, to give up. It just means that the upswing's coming. And that's a positive thing. I've also created a personal rhythm tracker. You can grab that, click the link in the description of this video, and you can have access to that. Use it to spot your patterns. Use it to find out what your energy looks like through the day. So you'll only have to do it for a little while, and then you're going to understand how to flow with your rhythm instead of against it. So that's it for me for now. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, trust the tide, trust yourself, trust the process, and keep moving forward. Talk to you soon. Bye.